Hi, my name's Dan. This is a VTuber model I found that was free to use, and there's a guy I wanted to tell you about that I read about in a book. There's a guy called Adam de Osgodby, and he was a medieval gangster, murderer, prison break guy, probably lots of more things that he got away with. And I read about him in a book called Unfortunate Ends by Soren Lilly, which is a really good book. And I really wanted to tell someone about this guy, and no one I know is interested, so I made a VTuber model to talk to the internet about it. So the first records we have of this guy was in February 1324, where he's named in the records of a robbery. There's a guy called John LeBond of Berrington who's walking on the road between Wickham and Beaconsfield, where suddenly he's set upon by a gang who are trying to relieve him of a blue and burnet robe and about 3 shillings worth of silver. By the way, I'd never heard the word burnet before, so I did a little Google, and it is a plant which can be used to make a dye. And if you're interested in what that dye looks like, the only record I could find when I searched for an image of a burnet robe was this image of King David from a Bible that was written roughly around the 1300s as well. So that's what a burnet robe looked like. Clearly it was valuable enough to steal. This guy, Adam de Osgodby, might have been part of the gang that robbed John. Actually, given what I'm going to talk about that happened next, it seems pretty likely. But as I said, catching criminals back then was hard, and he probably would have got away with it given that there were no other witnesses, except for the fact that John recognised that one of the people who robbed him was one of his colleagues, another John Merthyr. And so on the 2nd of June, John Merthyr was being chased by town guards. Knowing that all his avenues of escape were cut off, he sought sanctuary in a church. Now, seeking sanctuary is something you hear about quite a lot in sort of books and things like that. And it didn't actually mean that you would just get away with the crime if you ran to a church. But what it could mean is that your punishment might change from being executed to something called abjugation, which means that you'd be stripped of all your possessions, you'd be shaved bald, and you'd be forced to walk barefoot out of the kingdom and then start a new life, I don't know, in Wales. And at least until the current king died, and then you could maybe sneak back in. But the reason why abjuration was seen as a serious punishment was because it sort of marked you in God's eyes as a sinner for the rest of your life. And so if you were the kind of person who was really devoutly Christian, it's sort of, you're damned to hell if you are abjugated. But if you're the kind of person who's maybe not so devout, then it's a get out of jail free card, or a get out of execution with not execution card. So John Merthyr is under sanctuary of the church, awaiting his banishment from England and eternity of damnation, when one night our subject, Adam de Osgodby, arrives along with some accomplices who we don't know, and he frees Merthyr from the church and smuggles him out through the churchyards into the night and away into safety. 5 days later, after his medieval prison break, Adam's out on the town with his best mate, Richard Wakeling. They're out after curfew, they're probably drunk, and they're definitely armed. Perhaps a night of celebration after getting their buddy out of jail, I don't know. Either way, at some point before midnight, Adam and Richard approach a constable of the peace, who's basically police before police were a thing. And with no sort of state-funded law enforcement at that time, a constable of the peace would maintain order and perform minor judicial duties on behalf of the local parish. And so the constable in question was someone called Richard Overhy, and our villains attacked him with swords and bucklers. A buckler is a small shield, just like in the picture here. So why they attacked the constable, not known, but they did, and he died. Perhaps the guy knew Adam, recognised him, and said, I recognise you as the guy who stole that guy out of Sanctuary. Maybe it was a random attack. But yeah, for whatever reason, Constable Overhay didn't die straight away. He was actually critically injured and he survived for another 24 days, but he did die eventually. A few days after attacking Richard Overhy, Adam de Osgodby and 8 unnamed allies head to the house of a man called John de Staunford le Sherriman, or Sherriman perhaps. Now Adam, as soon as John le Staunford opens the door, Adam hits him in the chest with a piece of iron fixed at one end of a staff, shattering his ribs. Adam leaves him for dead. Once again, the victim survived for a while, but ultimately died on the same day as Adam de Osgodby's first victim. Once again, we don't know why he attacked that man, that's lost to time. Perhaps, well, whatever reason you could think of for a modern criminal gang to attack someone, it's probably a similar reason to that. So a few days after attacking John de Staunford le Sherriman, and before either of his victims had died, Adam de Osgodby himself was actually found dead on Oxford High Street, on what is now Corn Market, or Ship Street. He was stabbed in the stomach with a dagger by a town guard called Ernald Flingaunt. Ernald had been tasked at guarding a prisoner who had taken sanctuary in the church and making sure that yet another escape didn't happen. There's no historical record of what happened, but at some point Adam de Osgodby gets stabbed in the stomach and Flingaunt runs away. Adam fled one way. After being stabbed, he made it a few yards and he died in the street shortly afterwards. Flingaunt apparently didn't have a license to kill in his guarding duties because he fled the other way, and there's no historical record about what happened to him other than he fled the scene after he stabbed Adam. Although for him to be mentioned in these documents, it seems like he must have probably been caught, because how else would they know that he was the one who stabbed him? And so ended the crime spree of this medieval gangster, Adam de Osgodby. Only the few days before his death are recorded. We don't know anything else about him. It seems he was probably quite an interesting and hardened criminal, given that, you know, he did all these things in the last few days of his life. Whether he was the leader of this gang or just some hired muscle with a penchant for breaking people out of sanctuary, we don't know. It's not unreasonable, though, for me to describe these people as gangsters. I was doing some extra research because I didn't want to just copy the details in this book, and I found that there was a study by the University of Hawaii that found that there was loads of different organised crime groups operating in medieval England. One of them, probably the most famous one, was a group called the Cotterell Gang, which were founded just 4 years after the events that I described here. And they were involved in running protection rackets, extortion, kidnap, and they were even recorded to have bribed sheriffs to look the other way. Maybe I'll do another video about that one day, I don't know. But yeah, I just wanted to tell you about a guy who I read about and who I wanted to tell people about. I'm not a professional video maker, as you will have known. I used PowerPoint to make this video, but hopefully it was interesting, and I will try and link the websites that I looked at to learn stuff other than the book. Thank you. Bye.